Coming live from Calgary, Canada is our guest tonight. Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Kim Derrick Rozdeba, branding guru, author, speaker, and blogger. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you, AJ. I'm very excited to be here. Where I am currently, it's minus 30 with the wind chill. It's about minus 40. So I think everybody else is probably somewhere a little bit warmer.
Yes, indeed, we are. We are in a cold situation in New Delhi, but yes, it is much comfortable than the minus. Maybe today early morning it was around 8 degrees. I'm sure it is better now. I haven't checked it, but it is a lot difficult. Maybe this conversation about brands and brand building and branding will bring some warmth not only to the viewers but also to you in those minus 30 degrees temperatures. So let's get to the talking on branding itself. So my first question is to understand from you, Kim, is you say branding is a process and not a goal. And today the world is flooded with brands jamming every communications with channel with the hope of gaining prosperity and fame. And that is where they are not able to do it, and they don't understand that branding is a process and not a goal. And the goal is to surpass customers' expectations at every touch point so they feel the brand's love. How do you see the present state of brands and branding that is happening in the backdrop of this thing that you believe in?
Great question. So it's very complex and it's chaos. I mean, what we have today, I mean, go back 10 years, go back 20 years ago, and the channels we had to communicate with customers were fewer. Today, we are inundated with too many channels. Just think of the social channels from a digital perspective. We're also seeing different demographics and use of different channels. So the complexity of getting your message out has increased tremendously. That being one thing. The second thing is that there's way too many brands out there. Again, you go back in time, there was a handful. You go into a grocery store and you would see, 3 or 4 different boxes of cereal. Today, there is just a whole massive amount of different choices. And so all these choices that we have, how do we get all this information into our head? We have a list. And ideally, we want, as a brand, to be on that list and to be considered as you walk by. Because each time, you're not necessarily going to buy the same thing. There are going to be other things that you're going to actually look at. Maybe it's price, maybe it's convenience. It could also be just how are you feeling that day? So getting on the list becomes the critical piece. How you do that is a number of different ways. And so one of the things I've done is I've developed the 5 C's of branding to help compartmentalize how do you build a brand. Right,
Kim. We'll come to the 5 C's. But first about this too many brands thing, and that is making the messaging part very difficult. One thing we cannot do is about the number of brands. But what is it that we can do about communication and the type of branding that we are doing at the moment with whatever communication channels that we are using? Is it because either there is some sort of a difficult task we are trying to achieve? As you said, branding is a process and not a goal. But actually, everybody is trying to achieve pushing their messages into the heads of people as a goal. And that is where the disconnect is.
Yeah. So really, you have to start with the product. And the product has to be the best of its own unique niche. So you have to define, and you can't be everything to everybody. And I think that's the first thing you understand is who is going to be your target audience, and what is the unique benefit that you're going to provide. Now, the unique benefit can be something physical, or it could be something perceived. So you've got to actually understand what is it that you're actually trying to communicate and put into the heads of your consumer, because we compartmentalize things. Ideally, if we can actually associate one word to a product, that would be much easier for us to actually keep it in our minds. Being first is really important. Becoming first allows you to put that into your brain, because it becomes important. Now, I can ask you, who was the first pilot that flew across the Atlantic? Do you know? Do you know the answer to that, AJ? Pardon?
I cannot recall immediately, and maybe if you say the name, maybe it will ring some bells. But as of now, immediately, I cannot.
Lindbergh. So Lindbergh was the first.
Right.
Who was the second? Impossible, right?
Right.
But if I ask you, who was the first woman, would you be able to answer that?
As I said, I can't remember, but the one who vanished, maybe in midway after that?
Earhart. So yes. It was Earhart.
Right.
She was the first woman.
Right.
Interestingly, she was the second person.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is first is easier to remember. You remember the first one that wins the World Cup. You don't remember necessarily the second. So being unique, having that position helps. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to succeed, but you also have to make sure that you're continually emulating exactly that message that you're starting with to that particular target audience.
Okay. Now, Kim, you have guided some of the Fortune 500's oldest and most iconic brands, and even now you are heading a very responsible position in one of the top brands at the moment. You have 3 decades of strategic planning, branding, and executing multi-million advertising and marketing campaigns, PR and corporate communications in agriculture, pharmaceutical, petroleum, airline, telecommunication, and on automotive industries. So you are the master for today. You are ideally the master to speak about brand and branding. So from your perspective, I would like to understand for the viewers, after so many years into this space, what have you understood? What exactly is brand and branding about today? Because you have already said that branding is a goal, is a process and not a goal. But for people who are trying to enter this space or trying to understand what this is all about, how should they look at a new year in terms of building a brand which is a beautiful one and not about, which creates a wrong perception about either the product or the company?
So when you start as an entrepreneur, you are either building something physical, or it's a service that you're offering. And what you tend to do, last thing you're thinking about is this a brand, and how should I make this a brand? You're so focused on the quality and how you're actually producing what you're producing. And how do you get it to market? How do you get it to your customer? You've got a whole bunch of things to think about. The last thing you're thinking about is the brand. However, as you start developing that relationship with your customer, the brand does start appearing. And what I mean by that is the brand is the perception the customer has. Jeff Bezos says it, I think, quite nicely. I'll paraphrase him. It's what your customer says when you're not in the room. And it's that becomes the brand. Now, the brand is owned by the customer. It is their perception. It is their emotional attachment. So once you start building that, you have to understand what is that attachment so you can continue to emulate it. Because if you don't, you'll become schizophrenic. And they'll go, well, last time I came, this is the experience I had. This experience was totally different. Airlines. I mean, airlines can't replicate the good experiences very often. And so, they have a trouble trying to make sure their customers are happy. So they give them points, they give them, maybe better service once they're on the plane. But there are things that you have to do. These are things that have to be consistently provided. So when you get to the brand is, as I said, owned by the customer. And so that's why it's a process, because it's continuous. And that expectation continues to increase over time.
Right. So, Kim, if brand is owned by a customer because of their emotional connect, most of the times, what is the responsibility of a brand custodian or the CEO or even the board? Because many a times we are seeing that the brands are only talking about getting the maximum out of their product, their company, and even out of their brand image. But what about brand responsibility towards the customer who actually owns the brand, as per you?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of people think that branding starts with marketing, and it does, but marketing is not just the only way to communicate. It is, and you brought up the CEO, which I think is a great example. The CEO, and if you look at some of the top brands today, the CEO owns the brand. They are part of that experience. And sometimes, whether you like it or not, again, not every customer or every person is going to be a fan of a particular brand, but that CEO has to live it. Every employee has to live what that brand represents. Now, that representation has to be determined as you develop your relationship with your customer. What I found with a lot of successful brands, particularly those that the entrepreneur is actually, part of building that brand, they're interacting with their customers every day. I go back to Jeff Bezos. He, in his boardroom, when he sits down in his boardroom, there's an empty chair. And that empty chair represents the customer. And it's there as a symbol so that every decision that is made in that boardroom is made for the customer. And so I think that's a really powerful signal of the importance of a customer. And so a brand is owned by everybody that is associated with, because that's a touch point.
Right. One more question on this, Kim, is that CEOs may come and go, employees may come and go, but the brand custodian, actual owner of the brand, is the customer. He or she will be there. Then why is it that boards or the promoters who are there, who actually has ownership of the company, they still let that thing happen when brands are getting, you can say, tampered with? And in a way, you are actually hurting the customers and hurting their connect with the brand that has happened after so much of hard work and in so many years. So how is it that is it happening? Who is responsible for this? And if the customer just kicks out the brand out of his life, then why do they still feel that it is like, as if it is just a one-off thing and we will still manage to again win back the customer? How does it work in today's time? Why many a times we see companies taking it so lightly? You yourself said the goal is to surpass customers' expectations at every touch point so they feel the brand's love. Where has all that love gone in today's time?
So you're quite right. I've seen when I've done my research, in particular entrepreneurial brands, where the person is the brand, and that person either passes away or they sell the organization, and there is a rough period of time. And that rough period of time is that transition of understanding what the brand represents. You know, if you're the entrepreneur and you know it intrinsically, you know what your brand stands for. But if it's not written down so that everybody else knows, it gets lost or it gets misinterpreted. So you must establish a clear understanding of what your brand is, the vision. I mean, you hear brand story. It's the story of why this brand exists. And so that's really important that that is articulated very clearly and so that everybody understands. But your question goes a little further than that, is that, there are some brands that as time goes on, it's more about making money than it is about satisfying the customer. And, we're going to be going into possibly a recession, and there will be times where you're going to have to balance the two. But ideally, if you focus on your customer, you will get somewhere probably more positively, beneficially from a financial perspective, than as you start tinkering with everything and start taking things away.
Right. Thanks, Kim, for this understanding. Now, let's understand it better through your 5 C's of branding. What exactly are your 5 C's of branding? And then I'll ask you more questions about brand custodian and brand ownership.
Thank you, AJ. So the 5 C's, the first C stands for commitment. And this is your brand purpose. This is the why. This is the what I've been talking about, of really being able to understand that. The second one is called construct. And construct is the physical aspects of the brand. It's the logo. It's if it's a product you consume, it's the taste, it's the smell, it's the fabric, it's all of the aspects, the colors. If it has a sound, it's a unique sound. It's the total experience that you're constructing for the customer. The third one is your community. And your community is not just your customers. It's also your employees. It's your stakeholders. It's your influencers. It's all the people that you interact with, and even your suppliers. Hugely important. The next one is your content. And this is the one I mentioned earlier, AJ, is about the marketing. This is all the channels that you're going to be utilizing, your leadership as well, your voice in the community, all of the things that you will be touch points of being able to communicate to your customer. And the final one, and this is the one that I think a lot don't even think of, is the consistency. And consistency is about replicating what you're producing or what you're giving to your customer continuously. It's about data collection. It's about analysis of making sure that you are meeting your customers' needs, if not surpassing them. And also looking at trends as well. So the consistency one is this part that I keep talking about, the process, because it continually evolves.
Right. Now, out of these 5 C's, what do many companies poorly execute? You must be seeing day in and day out.
I would say it would be the consistency. That is the hardest one. And it's process, right? It's not as fun. I could do an advertising campaign, tell them how great we are, as opposed to how can we make the product better? How can we make the product cheaper? How can we make it more convenient? How can we continually making the product better and looking at the data and analyzing the data to really understand what is it that our customers are telling us? What's the competition doing? What's the marketplace doing? What's technology doing? So this is the area that I think a lot of companies either don't spend a great deal of time on, or they don't actually look at it seriously to start tinkering with their products.
Okay. So who is responsible for that? Is it you have hired a wrong advertising agency? Or is it that you have not understood your customer well? What about the buyer's journey? And second thing is, that is it the bigger reason is that have you taken the customer for granted? Because if there is no consistency, it means you are actually tampering with the feelings of the customer who is still with the brand, and the way you are doing it, he may leave this brand anytime. Well, who is responsible? The main reason for asking this is, Kim, is to help people understand this and rectify that problem inconsistency.
So it is everybody's responsibility within that company or that organization. It's every touch point. So, give an example of a customer's journey, right? If it's a product that you're selling within a store, where is it on the shelf? To when you take it home, are there instructions sufficiently that you know how to use it? If there's a need for a call center, that the person that you're talking to is going to help you. If there is a product failure, I mean, these are wonderful opportunities. If you have the ability, customers reached out to you. And if the customers reach out to you, they're needing help. Well, if you haven't been able to help them, that's not a very good experience. And I've heard many times where a customer has been in trouble and the brand helped. And guess what? They are your biggest loyal advocate ever out there, telling people how great the experience was. And there may have been a failure. It may not have been the brand's problem. It may have had nothing to do with the brand, but they felt that maybe this brand could help them. So it is all about every touch point. And so there's, sure, marketing seems to take a large part of this within larger organizations, but in actual fact, it's every employee's responsibility.
Okay. And what about a new company? Which C is the most important for it?
So I would say the commitment. Really understand why you're doing this. And make sure what you're doing is big enough so that you don't actually put yourself in too small of a box. I'll give you an example. There's a number of companies that have really specialized, and they specialize. I'll give you Apple Computer. It started as Apple Computer, and then it started getting into the music industry, and they had problems with the logo because there was already a company out there, a production company by the Beatles that had a music company. But I mean, you start with a why and understand why you're doing this. What's your purpose for doing this? And that will help you along the route, because that becomes your ruler, your guide as you make your decisions to grow your company and grow your product line, to see, does this fit? Does this fit with the promise that I'm giving to my customer? And will this make sense for them? Virgin Airlines, music, Virgin. There's a whole number of different products that come out of the Virgin trademark. But it makes sense. It makes sense because the value and the purpose is so big and so important from the experience perspective. It doesn't matter what the product is.
Okay, Kim. Now, one thing, you talked about the new company, you talked about the bigger companies. Many a times in today's time, there are buyouts. Bigger companies, they either merge or they buy out smaller companies, many a times to actually build on the brand or the company they have, or many a times it is just to buy out the smaller companies, and just get rid of the competition. And then you find, now, how is it that overnight, and that is where your expertise I would want for our audience is, among whom many would be brand professionals and all, overnight they just that company does cease to exist, the smaller company or the company that has been bought. The customers of those companies they have a close connect with that particular brand or that company or their products. The new company, many a time, they are not very sensitive in the way they are dealing with this whole process. maybe some PR press release here and there, maybe some word here and there. But then they expect is that the merged companies or the company that ceases to exist, their customers will immediately be loyal to the new brand or the bigger company.
Yeah.
What would you suggest to people who are going to be part of such processes in the future, how they can be sensitive to in this part, as well as look at the business part also, make it assimilate so well that it is actually taking care of the sensitivities of a company which does not exist, but they are going to deal with the customers of that brand who are actually the custodian or the owner of that company. What would you advise? Where will the mind and heart and the pocket and heart meet at the same time? Because it's about humans, it's not about robots.
Yeah. Great question. Not an easy answer, though, for something like this. You have to really understand, okay, what's the purpose for buying it? What was their intention? If it's to actually take the brand and then expand it to a bigger markets or outside a country, it really becomes really important to understand what is it that you have? What is that brand? And it's not such a simple, just do some research. Go do some research. Go ask your customers, because your customers don't know how to answer. It's a relation. It's a feeling. It's emotional attachment. How do you get that? There's some research that you can to try and nail some of that, but some of it is at the moment. And so we're rational. I mean, every time we are asked a question, we are rational about our answers. We're not emotional. I mean, go buy a house and you can quickly figure out, you become very rational as to why you bought it. But when you bought it, it was a feeling. So it becomes really important, whoever's acquiring, as to why they're acquiring. If they're acquiring it just for the, as you mentioned, a couple of different scenarios there, is it for the production? Is it for the expertise? Is it, it could be just the employees that you're trying to hire, the innovation that they have outside of the brand. But if it is about the brand, and if you do want the brand to exist, you better understand, can you expand it? Can you expand the market? Because expanding the market, what does that mean? Are you expanding it to other regions? Are you expanding it to other customers? Are you going to come up with a more higher quality? I mean, go in the car industry. I mean, they had looked at, they wanted to get, higher luxury vehicles. Then they had to open up separate dealerships because they understood that customers weren't going to go to the same place. So you have to have your eyes wide open, and you have to test. Testing things is probably the best way. I also tell entrepreneurs, go slow. If you go slow, one customer at a time, you can fix it. If you go fast and you try to go broad too fast, if you fail, you fail. And you brought up the point, of keeping that love for the brand. It's like a harvest. When you invest in a brand, you can harvest for a while. People will give you some leeway. We've seen brands do missteps. Depends on how they respond as well. But people will usually give you some leeway over time, but only so much leeway. And if you've not proven to them over time, it could be just a bad situation. I'll try it again. That airline, it wasn't their fault, the bad weather. I'll try that again. But if it continually fails and doesn't meet your expectations, you will move on. And we've seen that. We have seen brands, that have been acquired, and they've been put into different markets. They've taken a different marketing approach, and they have failed.
Right. Now let's move on to women brand builders. You've recently written a book, your first book, Branding Queens, and it's about 20 incredible women who uh, built iconic brands. What is this book all about? If I understand, if these are, around 75% of women, women consume about 75% of brands, but they are very less in terms of brand builders. And this book is about, about 20 incredible women who built global brand dynasties. Can you tell us why this you wrote this book, what this book is all about, and can you tell us about this incredible women who have built such iconic brands?
Love to, because this is a passion of mine. Took me 3 years to write this book. It actually all started out what Veuve Clicquot. Veuve is a French word for widow, and Clicquot, champagne, very nice champagne. And I realized, why would you put widow on a bottle of champagne? So, and then the next thing I discovered, of course, it was a woman that had built this brand. And so it got me thinking about, who are these women? Are there women, and how many are out there that have built iconic brands? So I started that journey, and I found 20. The youngest brand is 18 years, and that's Tory Burch. They are across a number of different industries. One unique one is Beach Aircraft. Ann Beach started a company with her husband. Her husband passed away quite young. She could have sold the company. That's what normally you would have done, but she didn't. She continued on to run it. And in several cases, this was the start of many brands. But there have been a lot of women who started from ground zero. Elizabeth Arden. Elizabeth Arden is an incredible lady. She started off selling facial creams in a jar. She made it from her house. These are incredible stories. So these are 20 incredible stories about women who started off, in many cases, with nothing. No education, no experience of building a brand, but they had a passion. And a lot of cases, they were the customer. And, I talked earlier about understanding your customer. Well, they were the customer in a lot of cases. So, and they continued to learn from their customers. And one of the other aspects that I also noticed through all of these women is their passion to learn, because they didn't know everything. And they walked into situations, learning. They had to. Otherwise, they wouldn't have survived. I always like to say, one saying that is used often for the giants of industry is, "I will build it and they will come." That is a very strong statement. These women didn't think that way. They thought, "I have a problem, and I think I can solve it, and I will be rewarded by customers that will be happy with that experience."
Right, right. And why do you think that these women could be so successful in spite of having so much of competition from all quarters? What is it that you noticed, apart from building that brand? What is it that they kept on, were able to build such iconic brands? Is there any particular reason, or should we consider that that women are better brand builders?
So one of the things that well, it's actually two things. One, they had a really good sense of themselves. Again, put yourself in a position in a man's world where you are perceived as not knowing anything. And you would come up with a concept or an idea, and people would say you're crazy. So they had to believe in themselves, because nobody else did. And they had this conviction. It's not to say that everything they did was right. Not everything they did succeeded, but they learned. and they were innovative. They were not afraid to take risks as well. Maybe it's because you've got nothing to lose. I don't know. But they did take risks. They were calculated risks, though. They also, the other thing that was very similar in all of them was their empathy, understanding, as I said, their customer, and being empathetic, being a caring brand. This is something we hear today. We didn't hear that 10 years ago. We didn't hear that 40 years ago. We didn't hear that 100 years ago, a being caring brand. These brands were caring. So your question, are women? I think so. Today, they are better listeners. They are more empathetic. And that's what a brand has to be.
Right. The word, caring brands, I'm quite, enthused to understand better. What is a caring brand in today's time? Is it that brands have become very self-centered and instead of focusing on the customer, or is it that they have become only sellers and not actually caring for their customers? If you tell a brand manager or anyone else who is responsible for a brand, what is a caring brand all about today?
Yeah. So great question. Again, it depends on the brand and what its footprint is. Younger people today, Generation X and Z, or Y, sorry, and Z, are really looking at brands and saying, what are they doing to our earth? What are they doing to our planet? And this is where the caring comes in, as to what is that footprint that brand is leaving. So if you take water out of the ground, are you replacing it? And how are you replacing that water back so it's still usable? We have finite, and I think this is what we're noticing with climate change. We have finite resources on this planet. So how are brands utilizing these resources, and are they using them responsibly? So every brand, it will be different as to how they should be caring. But transparency is one of those pieces of them, in the sense of, are you transparent of exactly? And it goes back to your commitment. Are you fulfilling your commitment? When I look at caring, it means different things for different types of brands.
Right. Now, what about, branding for companies or bigger brands? And there is this big hot word called personal branding, because I seem to understand from their understanding to several of the people I talk is that you become an expert of so many things and they keep on talking about it all in the social media, that you become an expert, you keep on pushing out anything in the social media on all communication channels that is possible, and that will lead to personal branding and better branding of yourself. The more you are seen, the better, bigger, the more you are accepted. How is it? How do you see? Would you explain to us exactly what branding is all about and what personal branding is all about? Because we get to hear this word so much, but I still need to understand it better.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of personal branding. Brands. Here's the funny thing, and this is a quote. I can't attribute it because I can't remember who said it, but it was a great quote in saying that products are trying to become more human, i.e., brands are trying to become more human, and humans are trying to become brands, which is pretty funny when you think about it. Sure, there are famous people that can become brands, absolutely. But it starts by being famous, and then you become a brand. I think you're probably better to have a really good resume or a really good, LinkedIn profile. I think all of that's really important. But building a brand are for, I think, limited amount of people out there. For everyone to build their own personal brand, what does that mean? Because a brand, as I said, you've got to have one little spot in somebody's head, and it's a box, and so we don't act that way. Okay, I'm a branding expert. That's my little box. But I have other things I do outside of branding that makes me a full person. So I can probably put myself in certain channels as that one particular thing, and that's it. But try to be a brand all over the place. To me, it's a lot of work to being a brand. Good brands, successful brands, it takes a lot of work. Do we need to do that as human beings? I don't think so.
Okay, but a lot of people who want to become thought leadership, they say you keep on sharing your thoughts on whatever you know, or several times you don't know. You ask somebody else to write on your behalf, and things go out in your name. Either it's an article, or even it's a LinkedIn post or any other post, and then it will lead to thought leadership, and then it will lead to personal branding. Several of the top leadership also, I'm telling you, with my experience, even in the media for more than 2 decades, is many a times several of them just focus on building on their personal branding or trying to be thought leaders instead of focusing on the company or the posts that they hold.
Yeah.
How would you see that? And is thought leadership personal branding? Is it going to lead leadership, or thought leadership is something coming out of real expertise and not something like that you just can push out through your communication channels? It's not going to work that way. What are your thoughts on this?
So, great question. If you are passionate about something and you are absolutely dedicated to that particular idea or that discipline, it's going to come natural as a thought leader. If you want to manufacture yourself as a thought leader, it's going to be fine. It's not going to exist because you have to build so much. You've identified, several ways of building, getting other people to write things for you, do things for you. Sure, you can do that for a time period, but once you've stopped it, it's done, because it's not you. And so it has to be you. And I'll go back to some of these women. They were thought leaders. They were leaders of their field as well. And the reason they were because they were passionate about it. And so did they have help? Absolutely. They had help in supporting. But it depends on the leader. There is, a brand has a personality that is likable. Not all people are likable. There are some great, bright people that can't communicate effectively. So I just find that trying to be a brand is maybe not the success thing you need, because at the end of the day, it's your customers. So do something really well and you will become a brand. Do that thing well and consistently, use my 5 C's, and you will become a brand. But that also limits you, because you have to be in that box all the time while you're communicating to your target audience. I'll use one great example, Queen Elizabeth II, who recently passed away, but she was a brand for 70 years. She spoke once a year, 15 minutes. So her Christmas address was her only time that she spoke to multiple nations out there. And that was the brand. You could control it. It was controlled. We, as human beings, I don't think we want to be that controlled.
Right. How do people, now talking about, exactly about this book, Branding Queens, and people who want to understand much more from you directly, how they connect with you? How do they understand more about this book, and buy from where? Where exactly can they do?
So best place to connect with me would be on LinkedIn. I'm under Derrick Rozdeba, but you could also Google me. If you Google my name, you'll find my book, as well. It's available on Amazon, all the major book retailers out there. But yeah, just Google would be probably the first place, and then if you want to connect with me, LinkedIn.
Right, right, Kim. My last question to you, Kim, is you say you have lived a storybook life from Europe on $10 a day for a year to a Fortune 500 corporate leader, Olympic torch runner, and founder of Youth AG Summit, amateur chef to oinophile. I guess it's something related to wine, I guess. And musketeer, and blogger to mentor. So many things. How have you, in those personal branding words, if I use, have you managed to brand yourself? Or maybe I'll put it a much more human way. How have you managed to play so many roles at the same time to perfection? Because you are also a very, very, responsible father and husband.
So continue to follow be inquisitive, try new things. I try to, my first job, I said, I would stay in the job 5 years. I said 5 years would be good enough, then I'll move on. And I did that for a number of years. And then I actually started going out to 10 years because I was having too much fun. But it's all about, I love watching people and understanding people, but it is just being inquisitive and learning new things, trying new things, shaking things up, driving a different route, using the other hand, picking up a book that you have, a topic that you've never thought of. Magazines. I do that with magazines. I'll look and just look at the picture and I go, oh, this looks interesting. And I'll pick it up and I'll read it and I'll learn something. It's about just trying to learn new things. And you mentioned, $10 a day in Europe. That was when I was 18. And it was foundational for me because I kept learning every day something new. And if we start that way and we continue to develop ourselves, I think we become better people.
Right. Isn't being a better person the best brand perception of yourself?
I hope so.
Right. I want to understand, after having achieved so much, what is it that you seek now? Is it related to branding? Is it related to more learning? Is it related to more happiness? Or I leave up to you. What exactly that you seek now?
So I'm now, I think I'm now in a phase where I really want to share. I've experienced, as you said, a lot of different things, and I've had the pleasure of learning from a whole bunch of other brighter people than me. And traveling as well. I have not been to India. That's on my bucket list, but I haven't been there yet. But where I am today is sharing my knowledge. Writing. As you said, this was my first book. I've started my second book this week, actually. I'm going to hopefully see if I can get a couple of pages done over the holidays that I'm going to be participating in. So I just want to share and take the knowledge that I've learned over the last 30 odd years and put it onto paper.
Right. On this note, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much, Kim, for joining us.
Thank you, AJ. I really enjoyed it.